Over the course of the last few days, I've spent a decent amount of time trying to dig into what Etheria Restart has to offer, and after a few comparisons between the PvP tournament I was in, the final CBT, and the launch version of the game, I feel like I have enough experience between all three of them to gauge everything from the perspective of someone who hasn't spent any money but plans on being as competitively free-to-play as possible. Don't ask me what that means. So without wasting too much of your time, let's jump into the good, the bad, and the ugly of Etheria Restart. Everyone here all accounted for? Okay, let's start with the good. Etheria Restart feels like a game I've been waiting for a long time. While I'm a big fan of what Genshin Impact introduced me to back in 2020 as one of my first gacha games, as time went on, I've slowly realized I needed that competitive itch that Pokemon used to give me. But I still wanted to be within my niche of YouTube content. I don't know, it's kind of weird. There was Epic 7 or Summoner's War, but to me, it felt as though I was way too late in jumping on that wagon, especially if I intended on being free to play. HSR came along with a good quality turn-based RPG, and then eventually Etheria just kind of showed up on my front doorstep out of nowhere. A new turn-based RPG that presented some nice quality graphics and just so happened to be a gacha game. Well, obviously your boy just had to dig in. Something about this was a little different though. Unlike the other gachas I've played, this game was launching with well over 50 or so characters, but not as much as Pokemon's typical 100, more or less. That told me the devs were aiming for a specific type of meta where top tier strats would of course exist and dominate, but the room for counter meta or niche strategies still had opportunities to shine. That much was proven to me when I got my ass bopped by this character called Oball in one of the previous creator tourneys. With my own lack of game experience, I assumed just copying one of the winning teams from previous tournaments would do the trick, just like in any other game. But damn was I wrong. I kind of like it though, not the being wrong part. I like that this game isn't an immediate pull these 4 units then auto win. The fact that a number of these SR units almost feel like they were made to counter the SSRs in a way. Obviously not all of them, but the strategy building behind that thought is what intrigued me the most about Etheria. What's this button do? Who is that character? How does she work? Can I counter this with that? Or whose kit looks the most unstoppable? I have so many questions about the game's mechanics and strategies to this day that make me want to dig deeper. I mean, I'm literally watching streams and videos of my creative peers just to learn what their favorite teams are and why, the SRs to look out for, and even who builds into what team. Some questions I still don't fully understand, like how Dot functions in a currently evolving meta that cares more about speed than survivability, where Rosa is supposedly one of the best DPSs in the game, but then if I pull her, what are the units that are going to help me get that game plan going? Oh, and then there's the big difference between RTA and the Arena, which I think has their own meta for each one of them. I don't know. I'm not that high of a level yet to experience it myself to get that direct answer, but it's interesting seeing which teams are being used to climb a ladder. There's more about Etheria that I like from a pure game perspective, but at the same time, I think that's what bothers me. I've never played a gacha game that's so revolved around the meta of beating someone else that everything feels new to me. I've dabbled in previous ones before, sure, but nothing like a full-on investment. Should I be spending money to keep up with the players? Am I supposed to wail for units or for stamina, and then how quickly should I be progressing? How does the gear affect everything, and is it more static or fluid in the long run? Will items exist down the road? Or I guess the ultimate question I keep asking myself, how does a game like this shape and shift the meta without favoring one side or the other? And that kind of leads me into the bad parts of Etheria, if they could be called that. Most of these are my worries, so of course, take them with a grain of salt. This isn't meant to be some doom post or whatever, but instead a realization that I'm healthily looking for the answers to. The first thing I'd like to briefly discuss is the story, which kind of feels irrelevant. I mean, in all honesty, everything that isn't revolved around building my teams and preparing them for the end game feels irrelevant. I think that's kind of bad, but maybe my mindset about that is misguided, and I'm completely open to being educated, if that's the right word. At the moment, it feels like everything I do should be towards this specific thing weeks or even months down the line, which then incentivizes me to look further into the game or things that I'm not prepared for. New characters, events, do's and don'ts, mistakes, and so on. The raw experience of enjoying the game feels tainted in a way because there's so much information I need to absorb, and the earlier I study the books, the better off I'll be able to manage my account. On one hand, this isn't the worst thing by any means. I can quickly adapt to it, given that I have the knowledge readily available or told to me. On the other hand, what about someone who's jumping into the game without much of that information or insight at all? As a content creator, even though it's not our job, it often feels like we're put in these unofficial official positions to basically educate the audience and then lead them this way or that. I don't think any of us can lead someone in the direction of amazing RNG though, both for gear and character pools. That thing we also hear from players about a gacha game being generous or not, yeah, we need to talk about that. So in the case of how a free-to-play might experience this game, unless you're incredibly lucky at everything, you'll probably get 5, maybe 6 SSRs worth of pulls from doing all of the starter stuff. However, you better give blessings to Lord Sephiroth that all of them work really well together. I don't know, maybe you're missing the SRs needed to complete the full team. Then there's the constant and disorder animuses that seem to be the bee's knees right now. Stop, don't even type it, bro. I'm not even that old, all right? Like everyone says bee's knees. Does everyone say bee's knees? Yeah, no, that's a thing, bro. You're not gonna shut up. While I love the elemental rock, paper, scissors formula, I can easily see these light and dark units shaping the meta on a vast scale with how strong they seem to be right now. I mean, everyone has literally been re-rolling for the 2 characters named Lily and Heinrich, due to them being absurdly useful in a number of team strats. Unfortunately, I didn't really want to bother doing that. I chose to keep my sanity of not burning time more than I needed. But boy, is my account feeling that burn. At the moment, these are the units I have available in my account after about maybe 140 or so pulls, and my focus has been trying to build a solid team around Leanne to invest in. Some things work, some things don't. In that time, I've learned more about how characters like Chloros can implant his Doom Toll effect on a beefy enemy, then help your team bully down that recharge icon for him to do a follow-up attack for free. During the original PvP tournament, I didn't have enough time to understand how I could build a team around this, but now I do. And that kind of goes into a bit of what I wanted to dig into now, the knowledge checks. Under normal circumstances, I'm all about learning as much as I can to get invested in the meta. But Etheria almost feels like a job at times. It's not that it's horrible by any means, it's just kind of a lot. There's so many characters with different abilities, playstyles, and attribute in this game that it evolves into even more strategies than normal. So we can consider this both a pro and a con at the moment, but I like meta breaking in most of my PvP games. In the case of Etheria, the meta is quickly shaping up and there are some counters to a few of the top tier threats, but the knowledge that goes into that is something I don't see the average player experiencing on their own. Hellkid, for instance, has an ultimate called Shroud Barrier that not only acts as a shield that absorbs damage based off his attack, but it also gives the entire team full immunity to any debuffs for its entire duration. Now, how do you counter something that's physically immune to the type of attack that it's supposed to counter it? So far, the only strategy I've seen is just beat down the shield as quickly as you can, but that's exactly where he benefits the team. If you waste all of your big ammo on his decently sized shield, then they no longer have any real damaging options to worry about. Hellkid was always a problem in every PvP creator tournament, and on release, I don't see him being anything beneath one of the best sustains in the game. And that sort of presents a problem, in my opinion. Again, not the end of the world, and my hope is that this is just an early impression of mine that eventually will go away. In fact, I want that worry to go away. If the game has a number of SR units that counter these type of strategies, then I want to know what those are. I faced off against characters like Obal who absolutely rock my shit with stun RNG, so is something like that an answer to what Hellkid brings to the table? Unfortunately, there's no in-game way of me learning or testing this without having these units invested and acquired on my own account, and it's more difficult for me to consider this game's extremely generous when I need to factor into play that any given player needs 3 times that of what another gacha game asks of you. Unless you're rocking out with T0 units from the start, you need to build more varying options to tackle the different forms of content, and resource building in this game is pretty rough. Well, I mean, I guess it's really rough if you don't use stamina to refresh, but isn't that the same stuff you use to pull characters? I'm gonna take a breather here and remind you all, as well as myself, that these are still early impressions of my own experience across each version of Etheria that I've played. The SRs in this game are very potent. I like that. And it also seems like the PvP is catered more towards SR units, where PvP is dominated by the SSRs. Then finally, we get into the ugly. I mean, it's probably not that bad, right? As generous as Etheria Restart appears right now, I've gathered that it's designed in a way that requires a lot of characters for different types of teams and mechanical coverage. This goes well beyond the traditional DPS, support, and sustain categories that most of us are used to. We have units like Kraken or Fangus that each have delays in their kit, but then one focuses on freeze CC manipulation while the other is based around follow-ups and dots. The generosity isn't really generosity, it's more like a baseline for balancing because players need a lot more characters to get any decent archetypes working in your favor. And at one point, I was under the impression this would only matter for PvP, but then we have things like the Doki Doki Threshold, which is a perfect example of the game doing its best to teach you about building and using different teams for different fights. This teaches you simple things like using control effects to remove the enemy's 50% damage reduction buff, which would translate into teaching you how to pilot against certain teams in PvP, but PvP is an entirely different ballgame. Speed is king, and I have never been more serious about that statement. Where in games like Pokemon, speed is crucial, but it's not the end all be all. There are a number of ways to counter the fastest Pokemon on the field with strategies like Trick Room or Fake Out. Even building your Pokemon to be bulky enough to take a hit from the fastest opposing Pokemon on the field is one of the most viable strategies in the game because the game affords you the ability to do so. Pokemon has evolved over time to allow the players to directly influence their team's EVs and IVs, helping control game-defining factors that you, as the pilot, would want to be prepared for. The use of items and abilities, on top of the effects of the moves, all play a part. Even the RNG of a random freeze or a flinch can completely shift the match in a player's favor, and while we absolutely hate being the ones that get frozen, that's kind of what brings the hype. Those amazing highs and those crushing lows are what have created a wonderful PvP system over the years, and that's the feeling I believe everyone is subconsciously chasing. The edge. Etheria is like almost there, but at the same time, it's so far away. I love that there are dozens of different DPS types like Cleave, Burst Down, Wind-Ups, and Counters, and still, none of them play exactly alike. Rahu doesn't operate anything like Tiamat at all, and she doesn't function like Rosa either. Yet each of these units will absolutely blow your asshole out given the chance. The combinations for teams, strategies, and an evolving meta could be endless if given the room to breathe. There's tons about this game that is pushing in the right direction, but this is a gacha game at the end of the day. Without a strong enough balance that shifts over the course of patches, the meta can become stale fast. So let's hope for the best, but prepare for the, well, not so worse. I don't want to prepare for the worst, bro. At the end of the day, I see a lot of potential in Etheria Restart and have more hope that the devs will guide the game in the right direction that gives us a strong, ever-shifting meta. Something that isn't still for too long and constantly breathes life into the game with new character releases instead of giving us a repeat of history where almost every new unit is somehow the next best thing in the game. And I didn't even think about how new SR units would be handled. That's an entirely different thought. Regardless of that fact, I'm out of here. Let me know if you liked today's video. Leave a comment down below, all that fun stuff. I can't say my usual outro because it's inappropriate for YouTube. Like the video, comment, subscribe. Smell you later.